And we are live. Hey, folks. Today I'm just live streaming just my segment for the Expert Council show. So if you're on the stream, we'll go 10 to 15 minutes tops today. I probably will not be taking questions and things like that from the audience. I might highlight a comment or two, like Tom's right here, which is excellent. I work with people that constantly say, "Did you see that thing on the news?" And I'm constantly like, "Dude, once again, I don't have a TV and I avoid the news. Go away." And that is one way to come at some of this stuff. And I think it's a good idea. I did a show years ago, and I've run it a couple times in the rewinds called "Turn Off the Effing News," and I think there's a big case for that. But there is a point where we're trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And today, I want to talk to you guys about maintaining a balance in that world. And it's a difficult thing to do and a difficult thing to explain. And the two sides I'm giving is pulling at us right now are mainstream media and like wackadoodle conspiracy theorists. And I think it's important before we proceed with this conversation, we identify what both of those things mean, because a lot of people don't think they mean what they mean. So when I say mainstream media, I'm talking about anything that masquerades as news or media, if it's on TV or on the internet. I don't care what it is, as long as it's inside what you would call the main media narrative. So even if it has picked a flavor of the main media narrative. So Fox News and CNN both go on the MSN side, to be clear. And any website, even if it doesn't have an online news channel associated, or an offline news channel associated with it, like a newspaper or a TV show, if it's in that world, it goes in the MSN side. Now, let's talk about what is wackadoodle conspiracy theory. And when I have to come out with this, because I know there's people like, "Jack, the conspiracy theories have been proven 100% right in the last 2 years. Where have you been?" I don't mean the word that way. And it's important that when we have conversations, we use words and we mean the same thing. So I said wackadoodle or nut job or tin hat nutter or something like that. So how do we define that? So I think we have to start from a standpoint of conspiracy theorist as a phrase is now very similar in the modern vernacular to the word racist. I don't like what you said, so you are a racist, white supremacist, conspiracy theorist, whatever. And so I don't mean it that way. So there's a lot of people now that are proudly saying, "I'm a conspiracy theorist," and they mean according to the media. This is not what I mean when I talk about being pulled in the other direction by the wackadoodle, nut job, tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists. This is kind of how I mean it. It may be a little difficult to explain, but the best way I can explain it is this. When I meet somebody and it's clear that I'm dealing with somebody that wants to go down the conspiracy corridor. Denier. Somebody brings up denier. That's a very good word, too, to point out. It's another one of those. It's just a label we throw at people, and I don't mean it that way. So is there a such thing as a Holocaust denier? Yes. When we take that word and we apply it to someone in another realm to associate with them with the first realm, that's where we're being disingenuous. So when somebody uses conspiracy theorists to shut anybody up that disagrees with anything on the MSN, that's not what I'm talking about, right? All right, so in this world, what happens is you have to start picturing yourself. Oh, sorry, that distracted me from Finbear there. When I meet somebody, and it's clear they want to go down into the rabbit hole with any conspiracy theory, even one I agree with, I steer the conversation immediately so I know what I'm dealing with. Am I dealing with a rational person who has honest questions that differs from the mainstream narrative because we're kindred if I am? Or am I dealing with somebody that believes every conspiracy theory under the sun? And so I'll say, "So are you into like conspiracy theories and all?" And then if they push back with, "Oh, you just think it's," no, calm down. No, I'm just saying, like, are you familiar with a lot of these different things called conspiracy theories? Do you consider like a conspiracy theory buff? So I know they know more than one thing, because this might not be a fair question if you only know this one thing. So assuming they do, they know all the conspiracies from JFK to 9/11 to we didn't land on the moon to the earth is flat and everything else in between. I'll say, give me 2 conspiracy theories that you don't believe, or at least don't believe fully on the conspiratorial side. And if they can't name a couple, then I feel like I'm dealing with somebody that believes every conspiracy theory, and the intellectual conversation is going to be very low, and it's probably not worth having. And so that's the group I'm talking about on the other side, the people that want to pull everything to the absolute extreme version of conspiracy. And that doesn't mean they're wrong about everything. Just like the MSN is not wrong about everything. So how do you view yourself in this scenario where we have polarized in everything? We've polarized in socialist versus capitalism. We've polarized in race. We've polarized in wealth. We've polarized in everything. And it's just another polarization. I think you have to view yourself, because now we're not talking about just an ardent religious-like belief in a thing. We're actually talking about discussing actual events that you may actually need to know what's really going on about. You might not be able to stop the storm, but if it's coming, you need to know what kind of storm it is, what threats it's posing, and so what can you do about it? So I see this like you're standing on an old school playground, teeter-totter, a balance. And you're playing the game. I used to do this when I was a kid anyway. They probably don't have teeter-totters anymore because it's too dangerous. But you stand right at the middle, and you spread your feet on both sides of the fulcrum, and you balance. And if you lean this way, it starts to go that way, and you lean this way, it starts to go that way, and hopefully nobody runs up and slams it and knocks you off and laughs at you while you hurt and bleed because you hit a rock. And that's you. You're sitting there. And then on both sides, you have mainstream media, and then you have what I'm calling the tin hat nutter community today with all of these things. And I don't want to even give any specific examples, but it could be anything from did we land on the moon? Is the earth flat? To what's really going on in Ukraine, or what treatments actually work for our latest virus or whatever. And don't get mired in that. I'm just trying to say it's that broad that we're talking about here. And if you were on that balance beam in this metaphor, think of it as you have people pulling you in both directions. And so you have the MSM, mainstream media types, the I believe everything I'm told types, whatever the TV says, I equate with science types. So it's not just the media, it's everybody that falls in with them, and they're trying to pull you over there. And then you've got the people who are tin hat nutters, and they run websites and YouTube channels, or they just believe, and you're talking to them, and they're trying to pull you over there. And they're pulling you back and forth, back and forth. What you have are opposing forces. And where the metaphor breaks down, if that was really what was going on, all you would have to do is let them pull equally, and you'd maintain your balance. Because you're in a three-dimensional space of matter and weight and density. So as long as they were pulling about it just as equally hard, it'd be actually really easy for you to maintain balance. But we're not talking about the three-dimensional physical world in this tug of war. We move into the mental world. And you can now be pulled forward, backward, up, down, left, right, center, opposing, all at the same time. Now the three dimensions are truly three dimensions. They're not just left and right on this teeter-totter. And we can move into dimensions that we can't even express in three-dimensional space because we're in a mental sphere where two things that look similar are actually different. And we're being mentally pulled at and prodded at. And whether we want to accept this or not, we all have absolute 100% in us genetically evolved desire to fit into groups, to be part of a group. This is why people look for a label for themselves. I'm not this, I'm not that, so what am I? A certain amount of conformity that we seek. I don't care how nonconformist you are, you have this genetically wired into you. And it's because it's a survival trait. Because when we were very ancient as a species, or very young as a species, I should say, and we didn't have all our technology and knowledge and books and everything handing it down, and a group of hunter-gatherers came along and they saw something that looked a little bit different, there was I want to investigate it, and it also could be dangerous. And the more intelligent, more perceptive of the group would generally make a decision. This thing is interesting enough that we can risk it, and here's how. Or this thing is really dangerous because it's a saber-toothed cat, and I saw one of those before, and it's going to chop our heads off. So they would pull the group away. Now, if there was a special person in the group who thought that, hey, I don't think that's really dangerous, they were either a genius that was going to discover a new thing, or more likely, they were going to go and think, I can scare away the saber-toothed cat with a stick and take its kill. And then everybody heard loud chomping and disgusting purring. as their comrade got eaten. So we have this in us, this desire to conform to a group. And this is what causes the tension in the pull. And then the next thing you need to think about is every single thing that we do to maintain balance requires opposing forces. Walking is the most basic balance activity that we do on a daily basis. And it requires two forces. And they're both required. There is the resistant force of our muscular and skeletal systems and our neural systems and the mind-body connection that says this is how one walks and maintains balance. But the opposing force is gravity. And if we don't have gravity, we can't walk. We're like an astronaut in space. We can move in a totally different way that we can use inertial movement. And we actually have to be trained on how to do that effectively, but we cannot walk unless we have some force pulling us down. We could use magnetism, magnetic boots or something like that, I guess, but we have to have an opposing force. Well, in this model where we're doing this mentally, we have to be our own opposing force mentally. We have to resist the desire to go in either direction. And we have to be very careful that we don't do it driven by our confirmation and perception bias. So since I don't want this thing to be true, I assume that it's not true. And then I become more subject to the other side, whichever side it takes me down. And this is why people immediately attack you when you take a position that's not on either extreme. Because you've done the one thing they can't tolerate. You've thought independently for yourself. And instead of saying, independent thinker, we can't trust him, he's a witch, right? Like witch hunt, they actually throw you to the other side. So if we take an issue, for instance, the most hot button issue going on right now, the war in Ukraine, and a rational, sane thinking person comes out and says, look, this is not a cut and dry good guy, bad guy issue. Here's all the corruption and all the problems in Ukraine, and here's all the ways that the West has provoked Russia. I'm still opposed to this war. I'm not saying Putin's a good guy. I'm saying this whole idea that we are lily white in this is nonsensical. And when two nations go to war or two powers go to war, there's evil on both sides. Well, what do they say? Putin apologist. He's a Russian stooge. He's on the payroll. Like some dude like me is on the freaking payroll of Russia. Like that's an asinine, but that's a natural reaction. On the other side of it, the people that actually say this is a just war, right? If you could find those people, and they exist, they will push me to the exact opposite side and say I'm an apologist for the West because I say anything negative about the other side. And then you can just keep throwing all issues into this. And you'll see the pattern repeats over and over and over again. So why is this important? And how do we use it? It's important because at times we're going to make decisions for our lives based on our understanding of facts. And one of the most important decisions we can make, one of the most productive decisions we can make is this thing upsets me in some way, shape, or form. I don't like to see people dying. I don't like to see people abused or whatever. But then I can filter it to, here's the places I can make a difference in my life, within my circle of control, and within the lives of others in my circle of influence. And here's all the other space where I just have to do what Tom said at the beginning. I don't care. It's not my problem. There's nothing I can do about it. What some guy in Sheboygan, Illinois thinks about Vladimir Putin doesn't really affect my life. I'm not going to pretend that it does, right? Or what they think about whether or not a particular drug cures a particular disease or not. It's not going to, I'm not going to change their mind, and I'm not going to try. All I'm going to do is speak the facts that I've discovered and give the sources of those facts, let people make individual decisions. And I'm doing more than most of you should do because I am a media personality myself. I am a true independent media personality, educator, and journalist. I wear all three hats. And some days I come on here, I am purely in an educational mode. Some days I come on here and I'm purely in a personality mode. And some days I come on and I'm purely in a journalistic mode. And most of the time I'm blending those three. And I try to be clear where I'm at when I'm at it. So if you are not doing this, then all you need to do is make the decision for yourself in your life and then go on with it. And the number one way they keep that teeter-totter going and try to pull people out of the center where they hate them. And this is not a political center. This is a logical, factual center. This is where I will take all the information and I will analyze it and I will make my own decision based on the information and the information alone that's available at the time. And I will come up with this thing is true, this thing is false, or this thing is partially true or partially false. And I will either come up with enough information that this is a definitive choice, or I will come up with, for now, my belief leans toward X until such time that greater information is available. This is the single most dangerous thing in the world for states. This is a behavior that they cannot tolerate. It is inherently dangerous because if you don't pick one of those sides and gravitate towards it, you just might make independent, proactive decisions. And then the real danger is you might set an example of what that looks like, and other people might start getting off the extremes and coming to that center and getting proactive. And then what we're going to say is, since I don't have a side in the fight, and all I want is for things to be better for myself and the others around me, I'm going to work toward that end. And now what need do you have of the state? And the answer is very little. Very little. The entire way by which the state maintains its legitimacy and its effectiveness is through force. The state is force. And anybody that says it's not doesn't know what the state is and doesn't know what force is, and they're not worth talking to. The state is force. Without force, you have no state. You have a voluntary system of participation. Okay? You have, without universal force, by the way. So the thing about a voluntary system of participation, there may be force mechanisms within that position, that entity, but you choose to be part of it, or you choose to leave it, or you choose to never be part of it. Where the state's force exists upon you, whether you agree to it or not, for all things the state decides. This is an unnatural state for human beings to exist in. We're not supposed to live like that. The natural state of the human being is feral. We're neither wild nor domesticated, right? We kind of exist in that feral intermediary where we're wild, but we're organizing wild. We work collectively and independently at the same time, unlike something like a troop of monkeys who kind of like, if you fit in, you fit in. If you don't, you get killed or knocked out and you have to go find a place to fit in. Or ants, where if you're born in the hive, you're part of the hive. We totally, completely control our own destiny into how we associate with others and who we work together with. But yet we still have a wild nature about us. We're still part of nature, like I talked about on Tuesday with the permaculture episode I did this week. We still have that within us. And if we act on that, we separate ourselves from not only fear, but a belief that someone else can fix the thing that causes the fear. And once we do that, they lose control. Even if you have a minarchist society, the control is destroyed. So like you can have a minarchist government that worries about roads and bridges and national defense and basic free market commerce, right? And enforcement of contracts, voluntary contracts. It's going to grow into a monstrosity because that's what we started out with. In the more minimal the government, the more monstrous it will become over time. But if you started out there for a while, things would be really good. Unless you want to control other people, then it becomes very, very difficult to control people. Because if you give a person a problem, they're going to either solve it, work around it, or seek help in solving it, or compensate someone to solve it for them. This is a natural response of the human being when they encounter a problem, which is why everything that's done is based on disempowerment. And this is why you take the people in power, the MSM, etc. They actually empower the wackadoodle conspiracy people. They want them. That way, anybody that sits in the center that tries to maintain balance when they're being pulled in both directions can just be grouped in with whatever negative association has been created with the term. Racist, white supremacist, conspiracy theorist, privileged, take your pick. That's all they've done. They've made this giant list of labels. And it's like if you have a telemarketing job and they say any objection that the person you call has is in the manual. And, well, I don't need this. Well, I'm sure you think that way, but, and you just read what's on page 7. Right? And that's what the media does today. That's what and that's what the alternative has begun to do as well. They just create their own list of labels. This person said a thing I don't like. Conspiracy theorist, patag. It's been debunked, patag. Right? There's no actual facts brought to bear on the situation. And the worst thing you can do when you're attacked from other side, if you don't want to get attacked more, is provide fact. When you provide fact, then they really lose their freaking mind. People who want the truth, even when it's inconvenient, are never upset by the truth. When people want a thing to be a thing, and you give them a fact counter to it, that is when they want to silence you. That is when they become angry. So I encourage you, and look at the thumbnail I chose for this video. Right? It's two monkeys fighting. It's the MSN and the wackadoodle conspiracy theorist. It's not just those two groups. In almost everything where there are two opposing forces in the world today competing for your attention and your action and your compliance or non-compliance, the truth probably lies somewhere between the extremes. Notice I didn't say the middle. The truth lies in the middle in of itself is a fallacy. It is generally the case in these situations that one side is more right than the other. And that side will switch depending on what the propensity of each side is at the moment. But it's up to you to make these decisions for yourself and to understand that fighting the two sides leaves you susceptible to the other. If I turn and fight the left, the guys on the right grab me by the shoulders and pull me in, while the people on the left are shoving me to the right. And I'm not talking about political right and left. I'm just giving you arbitrary directions here. Same thing. I turn around and I oppose the right side of this balance beam. Then everybody on the right starts just shoving me. It's much easier to deal with me if I'm just some dumb, stupid fucking sheep that believes everything CNN says, right? Or if I'm some right-wing conspiracy theorist, right? Both of those are easier to deal with for either side than a free-thinking individual analyzing the information that's available at the time with independent thought, reason, and logic. That's terrifying. And I encourage you to be terrifying to the establishment. With that, we'll wrap up this segment, and I will be back tomorrow with an episode of Outback with Jack.